Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the SBDC webinar series, Bank Rules in QBO. My name is Paula McCain, and I'm a recovery business advisor for the North Central Texas Small Business Development Center. Today is National Name Tag Day and National Ranch Day. So for lunch, order a salad with ranch dressing while wearing your name tag. The SBDC is a leading provider of assistance for small businesses, and we are grant funded. And because of that, we can bring assistance to you, such as webinars like today's webinar at no cost. And we are here today for Bank Rules in QBO with Stacy Kildall and Bryce Forney. If you have any questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat room, and Stacy and Bryce will get to them during their presentation. Good morning, Stacy and Bryce. Thanks for joining us today. Look forward to it.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate you guys having us back.
Today's topic is near and dear to both Stacy and I.
Yeah.
Because it's we've talked about setup and some of the mechanical elements within QBO, and bank feeds, in my opinion, really take the possibility of automation to become reality. So let's start with some quick introductions. Stacy, what do you think we should know about you?
Well, I mean, there's a lot to know, but I think most importantly, I own and operate Kildall Services, LLC. I'm located here in White Lake, Michigan. I'm about an hour north of Detroit. I have been using QuickBooks since 1998. The first version that I owned was QuickBooks 1999, and I've been using it in all of its shapes and forms since then for quite a long time. And I've been a member of Intuit's Trainer and Writer work. Okay, let me
Easy
start
for
over.
you to say.
Yeah, member of Intuit's Trainer and Writer Network since 2005. And what that is we are a very small group of professionals. We don't work for Intuit. We all own our own businesses, and we are hired to create content and present that content to accounting professionals and small businesses like you guys.
My name is Bryce Forney. I'm a tax preparer in the San Francisco Bay Area. And in my spare time, I like to drive by Kinder photos and steal their backgrounds, as you can tell. So, enough about us being on video. We're going to go really just to audio and using the screen, because that's really what we want you to focus on. So to set the stage here for the value of bank feed in general is that we're getting transaction information directly from the bank or credit card. And with bank feed, we're able to record those transactions in the books very quickly and also accurately and consistent with what we have out there at the financial institution, because that's where the information sources. So this feeds into getting the best information out of QBO by better use of bank feed in general. So bank feed rules are an add-on to, I mean, just an additional empowerment of bank feed, where you get to specify for given conditions whether you want a vendor to be assigned or a name to be assigned and a category to be assigned, and then you can even set it to automatically record the transaction. So with the right implementation and diligence around bank feed rules, the bank feed can really automate. Like, would it be too much, Stacy, to say that this performs some of the bookkeeping?
I think it would be very fair to say we actually have a brand new client that we have just taken on, and we're really because they have such a huge volume of transactions that gets posted and charged to their American Express card. Bank feeds and bank feed rules are really allowing us to bring in all of those transactions and process and get that huge volume of transactions posted really, really quickly. We just got 2 emails while I was gone that I just finally had a chance to deal with from the client saying, okay, this charge and this charge, these are both automatically set up. These 2 vendors charge our credit card automatically every month. They're recurring. The amounts may change, but it's always this specific expense account. It's always this vendor, and it is always this class, because they use class tracking as well. So rather than creating a recurring transaction, which would be the same name, the same amount, the same account, same everything every month, we've set up a bank feed rule, because that allows, it doesn't matter what the amount is. When it sees a specific criteria that we set, which is usually the vendor name, come in through the bank detail, we're able to really save us time and save the client time, because what the client was having to do with the person that is no longer there, that will be bookkeeper, is they were not sure what the class tracking was supposed to be. So they would just leave the class empty and then post to the expense account, and then our client would have to go in and pull reports to see what had not been classed. And so by her saying, hey, we're doing this and setting up those bank feed rules, yes, it absolutely, the short answer is yes. It does help, and it really automates it. And the client was like, she literally, in actuality, emailed me all caps, 4 exclamation marks, when I told her, I have set this up with a bank feed rule, expense account, name, and class. She said, this is game changing. She was so ecstatic just to have that simple rule created.
Yeah, and the rules can do, because what we want is the information that goes into QBO, we want it to be right, we want it to be consistent, so that at the end of the week, at the end of the month, you can run reports that you can trust. So really, that's the value of bank feed rules.
Yeah.
So we're going to go into the mechanics of the setup of a rule, and here are some of the rules around the rules, if you will. So each rule looks at either money in or money out. So if you have returns and exchanges as well as purchases, you would need to set up 2 different rules even for the same vendor. And then you can have conditions around a rule, and we're actually going to go in and create a rule, so you'll see more detail around that. And then we can do this for various transaction types, and then we can specify a category and assign a payee. And then, as Stacy mentioned, if you're using class and location tracking in QBO Plus or Advanced, you can also add those fields to the rule. And then finally, you can set the rule so that it automatically adds the bank feed item as a transaction, and so that it does not even come up in bank feed. It's just going to record the transaction. It's a set it and forget it. Channeling Ron
The example
Popeil,
that I use
who
for
I
this,
love.
yeah,
Him and Phil
the
Swift. I mean, those are some great salespeople.
yeah, and the example that I use for this is always for my own books, because in the before times we used to travel so much for Intuit, so that when I never, if I'm traveling with my family, it's always a road trip. We never fly anywhere. So I had a rule set up that was called Delta, and it was for any money out for any bank or credit card account. And when the bank text contained the word Delta, it would automatically create an expense. The category or the expense account would be travel, and then the payee would be Delta Airlines. And I would just have QBO automatically add this every time, because I knew that it was a business expense, it was travel, it was Delta Airlines every single time. So that's one example of when you might use that auto add.
So what we're going to do is go through the rules screens just so you can see them enlarged, and then we'll switch gears to going into product and setting up some rules and seeing how they apply in our in the sample company or our little test company. So each rule needs to have a name. So typically this is the name of the vendor that's associated with the rule, or, monthly mobile phone service, whatever is the right trigger. And then you're specifying money in or money out, as we mentioned. And then you can actually put guardrails around what bank accounts or credit cards this rule looks through. So by default, it's all bank accounts. But if you're looking at one vendor who should only hit one specific credit card or one bank account, you can filter that. And then when you do the condition, or conditions, you have a choice about whether you're looking for any of the conditions or all of the conditions. So an example there might be if you're looking for Amazon transactions that are greater than $100, you would have two conditions, one being where the bank text or bank description is Amazon, the second being where the transaction amount is $100 or more. So in that case, you would want to specify all conditions. An example of where you might choose any condition is we can use, and we'll talk about different ways to set up rules, but one of the ways that rules can be set up is the classic example is for gas stations, where you might want to just have one vendor called gas station.
Yes.
And have that apply to multiple. I'm in California, so we have gas station names like Chevron, Arco, Exxon. I think these are mobile. I think these are relatively 76. I think these go throughout the country, but there may be others. Valero. So you might have a rule where you say where a gas station, any conditions would include Chevron, Arco, Mobile, 76. So
I
it's
do this for restaurants as well.
Oh, good example. Yeah.
Yeah, because you don't need to know every different Chipotle or whatever. So a lot of times I have one for hotels.
Oh, there you go. So there we can have a number of conditions where it's looking for specific bank text. And what we're saying is that we want to apply it where any of the conditions apply. Obviously, Chevron and 76 are not going to occur in the same transaction. So if we said we want to apply all of the conditions, that's not going to work out. So in that case, we would say any. And then finally, down at the bottom of this setup, we're choosing what type of transaction we want bank feed to create, and then what category we want to apply, and what payee. So that's the basic setup. And then going into more detail of what the conditions can be, our first condition is around whether we're looking for the description, the bank text, or the amount. And this is a really a trigger issue for me.
And me as
Oh,
well.
okay, great. I feel very strongly.
It's a visceral knee jerk. I dislike the description.
I'm glad we feel the same about this.
Yeah.
And it's not about right, wrong. My perspective is so what we see here is description.
I think it is right, wrong.
Oh, okay.
And the reason why I think it's right, wrong is I know this slide says QBO modified bank text, but I have yet to figure out from anyone how QBO decides to modify that text. It is as if it is just plucking it out of thin air and putting it in there. So I am railroading this conversation right now, running roughshod right over you, Bryce, to say, whenever you create a rule, the right thing to do is to use the bank text as the first set of criteria. Ignore the description. These are not the droids you're looking for. Just ignore that even exists.
Very well said. So then we've also got our I'm trying to think of the word. It's like condition of the condition and what my condition is in.
Oh, Kenny Rogers.
With the contains, we can either say we're looking for what it contains or what it doesn't contain or an exact match. So if your bank text is going to have a chevron in the name, then you want to say, okay, we're looking for what this contains. An example of what it doesn't contain, I'm trying to think. When would you look for something where
Never.
it
I would
doesn't
never look for
contain?
that. I'm just gonna say, I don't think that there is any
I mean,
point.
okay, I suppose there's a parameter. Let's say you have a rule for Chipotle. Bad example, because you should have a rule for restaurant maybe, but if you have a rule for Chipotle and you just want local Chipotle to be part of the rule, then you could look for doesn't contain and then mention some other neighboring cities. It's a real outlier in terms of an example, but I'm there are cases where the bank text would contain some trigger where you're like, whoa, if that happens, I want to look at it. I don't want the rule to apply because it's specific. So if you know, yeah, that's tough. If it
I
comes
just would
from a,
never, I have never had that
just never.
situation. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll walk that back. Either use contains or use is exactly.
I mean, you could, but I don't understand. I would never, I don't know any
Yeah.
use case or any example of if it doesn't contain.
Right.
That is
Okay,
just
so
me.
with the contains and is exactly, the choice between that is really about whether there is superfluous or additional information that's coming in through bank text. So going back to Chevron, often the gas stations will say Chevron and then we'll have something after that, the city name, the store number. So it'll say Palo Alto, store number 814, something like that. So in that case, you would want to say it contains Chevron. And I don't care what else is in there, but as long as Chevron's in the name, then this rule is going to apply. The is exactly means you have the entire string of what is coming in on the bank statement, what that bank text is going to be. So that's great where you know that that is consistent, or that there's one vendor that always uses the same exact description, and you would want to use is exactly so that when transactions come through that are similar, that they won't get automatically added or it won't be validated. You want to be able to take a look at it.
I would say I use this is exactly like because Google comes in. I have a client who has they have Google for Business, so they have like G Suite, they have Google Ads, and they also have Google Ways. So we have to do is exactly, because if you just do Google Ads, sometimes those get a little funky and they
Ah,
don't get caught. So we have to put in like is exactly.
ah,
Um,
good
and we
idea.
have to put in multiple criteria, like if it contains all of these. So if it is the bank text contains Google and the bank text contains is exactly. So we have a couple because it just I can't figure out. Facebook is another one where the ads come in just a little goofy every time.
Okay.
So that was
So
I do have use
this
case for is exactly. Woohoo.
Okay. So in database language, this what we're creating is an if then else statement, and these conditions are the if part of that. Then we go to, whoops, I shouldn't have used that word. Then we go to then, and where we're going to specify if the conditions are met, what do we want this bank rule to do? So in this case, we want this to be an expense transaction. We want to specify the category. We always, 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 in my view, want to assign the payee. And the
Mhm.
reason is so that these transactions show up when we look in the vendor center or the purchases area. We want to be able to see transactions by vendor. If we don't have a payee assigned, then if we do expenses by vendor, we're not going to see this transaction on the report. And then if you have plus or advanced, you can assign a class, you can assign a location or not. That's up to you. So this is the then where you're saying this is how I want the rule to apply fields and then create well, it's actually not going to create the transaction unless you tell it, I want to auto add.
Mm-hmm.
So by default, when you set up a rule, it's going to assign the payee, it's going to assign the category, but it's going to let you choose to add the transaction. So that's great for mission control. You may, once you see a rule working, you're comfortable that in 8,600 examples it never failed, then you can decide, hey, I want this to auto add. I don't need to see it. I know that this is working right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hesitant to do auto add initially, ever. I don't know about you. How do you feel about that, Stacy? Is there conditions where you would say, yeah, I'll auto add right from the get-go?
Yeah, there's a few. We had, and I use this example all the time in training. We had a client who used to, and I'm using air quotes here, accidentally use his business account when he would go to the aquarium. He lived in the Chicago area, and we would, if he saw it there, he would post it. If he saw it in the bank feed, he would post it before we would get a chance to like professional development. Which that's not. You're a landscaper, and I know you're taking the kids to the aquarium for a day. So what we did, because he kept changing this, or he'd dump it to, a lot of bodies get buried in cost of goods or office supplies. So, but most of the time he would put professional development. So we created a rule that said if the bank text contains aquarium, and well, a shed aquarium specifically, um, then always make it a transfer to owner equity or owner draw, and then we auto added it. I did not leave it and then let it sit and see if it worked, because I didn't want him, I just wanted it, I didn't want him to even see it coming in through the bank feeds. So
Right,
that is
that's
one
clever.
example. The Delta one that I created for my business also, like I just knew, I just did that auto add. I didn't even think about it.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there's a
That
couple.
makes sense.
Yeah, there's a few that I will just auto add, but for the most part, I'm gonna kind of wait and make sure that they work before I decide to auto add. Yeah.
Right. And when the auto add is enabled, you can go to the categorize tab. You can filter and see the ones that were auto added. So you still have the chance to do some review. It's just you would have to work to do that. It's not going to pop up and yell at you basically to take
Yeah.
action.
Yeah.
So here's an example where we've got multiple conditions and we're looking for any one of these conditions. So parking is another example, like restaurants,
And
like
gas
gas stations.
stations, hotels. Yeah.
So I think maybe, not maybe, I feel this would be a good time to go out into product.
We might, and by we might, I'm going to.
So here we are in the sample company, which is Craig's Design and Landscaping. So anyone can access this test drive company, the QBO test drive. And it's kind of neat because it actually has some transactions within the bank feed area. So here we see we have a transaction for Lara's lamination, business card lamination, it looks like. And we may regularly subscribe to, or not subscribe, regularly use Lara for laminating business cards. And we want to set up a rule so that we don't have, so that this categorizes, so that it assigns a payee, so that all we have to do is click add. So the first thing that Stacy and I recommend everyone does is to use this grid gear here, this little baby gear, not to be confused with the gear at the top of the screen, but this gear, and choose, well, two things. Choose copy bank detail to memo. Make sure that is selected because that means all of the text that's coming from the bank or credit card will get pasted into the memo field so it can be searchable later. And then also check the show bank details. The column always says bank detail, but if we uncheck, oh no, it doesn't. I'm a liar. The column will either say description, which is the truncated, mysterious, we don't really know how it's doing what it's doing information, or we say show bank details and we're getting the actual what's coming from the bank. Once that is done, now when we look at this bank detail column, we're confident this is exactly what's coming in from our bank or credit card. So we can go over to our rules tab and create a new rule, and we're going to call this Laura. I believe that I'm not able to put an apostrophe in the rule name.
You are
so
not. This is
we're just
correct.
going to make it. We know she's singular, just one business owner, so we'll just leave it. Not possessive. She's making cards for us, so there are cards. So these are for money out transactions. We're going to leave it for all bank accounts. And in this case, we're going to say all conditions. We're really only going to have one condition because any amount, I mean, I suppose you could put multiple conditions where you say as long as the amount is under $1,000, if we don't expect to buy something from this vendor for more than a given amount, that might be a reason to put an additional guardrail. But just for simplicity, we're going to say when the bank text contains really Laura's lamination should be sufficient. We could leave the whole thing about business card, but we may have Laura laminate other things. So Laura's lamination is going to be our trigger. And we're going to set this as an expense transaction. The category is going to be office expenses, and the payee is going to be Laura's lamination. And we can add that payee right from here. Wait, what happened to our payee? That's so weird.
Yeah, sometimes it does that. You add it and then,
Oh, there it is.
yep. That's a new little, it's a feature, not a bug.
So we're going to set this so that it does not automatically add. So it's going to apply these parameters. So now when we go back to banking, we can see that we have a rule and it has assigned the payee, it has assigned the category. So all we need to do is click add. So that's the beauty of the rule. If we had a typo in the rule, so it's Laura's lamination, but if accidentally we had a U in there and made it Laura's lamination, oops, that's not the right place. I want that in the condition. If we made a mistake in our condition and said we're looking for Laura's lamination, then when we go back to the banking tab, notice it does not apply that rule because the exact bank detail is not the same. So it's very, very specific, which is really a good thing, but it can be frustrating at times to think like the machine to be able to make the rule apply.
Yeah.
And the reason we call that out is oftentimes what users think is going on is not really the case. And so if you're frustrated that the rule doesn't seem to be applying and you think it should apply, don't blame the system. It's you or the way you're thinking about the rule.
Yes.
Put in a very delicate way, in a very loving way. You need to just review that rule and consider the reason it's not working.
Yeah. And it's always, I would say, if a rule isn't working, I have had situations where the rule has been entered correctly, and then there are very, very infrequent situations where the rule does not work. It just doesn't. I just had this happen. And so what I've done in that case is I have just deleted the rule and re-entered the rule, and then everything is fine. So it's very rare that the rule does not work at all.
Great.
I'm
So,
not going to say it doesn't ever happen, because it has happened.
okay.
Yeah.
So another element, speaking of baby gear, not specifically related to rules, but when you're looking here in bank feed, there is this grouping feature that I detest. I'm not sure why I do, but I just want to see all the bank feed items. So my preference is to have grouping turned off.
Oh, and it depends. So if you have a
Oh,
lot of rules, or I will say that I used to not like grouping, but
okay.
I really do like grouping turned on, because then I want to hit category or match, and sort by that column, because then everything that's matched is at the top. I can select all of them at once and get rid of those. Then all the rules will show up. I can deal with all the rules. And then anything that QBO remembers. So if you have posted, Apple to computer expenses or software and apps or something, but you don't have a rule set up, it will remember that, and it will suggest, if you have suggested the suggestions turned on,
Which
enable
is right
suggested
there.
categorization, then you can select all of those. And I mean, right before we started this webinar, I had a client who had 81 transactions in their bank feed. And with the grouping turned on, I was able to deal with all of them in, I would say, 2 minutes.
Hmm.
So I
Yeah.
think it's very helpful for me, but it may
Yeah.
not be for everybody.
Well, yeah, or I may just be in the infancy of my own implementation of that. That's a good point about,
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I used to really not like it. It drove me crazy.
right.
But now I use it a lot, a lot.
So, so that was a simple rule where we applied a vendor, we applied a category, and we told it we want to work with the transaction. So now we'll do a different example. In this case, we've got a transaction to White Lake Supermarket, and we're going to set up a rule. This is a frequent vendor for our restaurant, perhaps. And
No, it's okay. It's a grocery store. It's my personal card that you happen to be looking at.
right, I'm saying if the
I know, I'm
merchant's
just kidding.
oh, okay.
Just mess around.
So we're going to set up a rule to say, really, every time we see this vendor, we want it to apply to supplies, and we want it to automatically add. So we're going to create a rule. We're going to call it the vendor name. It's for money out transaction, all bank accounts. And we're going to say, well, let's say we're going to apply all of the conditions, but this time we're going to do not only bank text to make sure that it contains the bank text of this particular vendor, but also that the amount is less than $1,000. So this is to say, if we get a transaction from this vendor for more than $1,000, the rule will not apply. And we may ultimately still categorize it the same, but we want to see it. We want to see it bubble up, because we're going to see, what we're going to do is have this automatically add the transaction. So we don't really have we'll just create a food supplies category. Why the default is bank account, I do not know.
I know, isn't that drives me crazy.
Yeah. So in this case, I'm guessing we need to add our vendor. Okay, so now we're going to say we want to apply the food supplies category and the payee, and we want it to automatically add the transaction. So when we save this rule and now we go back to banking, we do not even see it in our list. I could swear I turned off grouping. So we don't even see it here in the list because it automatically added. So you might think to yourself, oh, how do I know? What do I know what this is? How do I know what the system is automatically put in? We can go to the categorize tab here and we can see that there was this auto add. So categorize is going to show all of the transactions we've entered through bank feed and highlight the ones that are auto add. So here we can see, and if we wanted to, we can go and edit the transaction. So you don't lose complete view of what's going on, even with the auto add feature. So another case for a rule, in this case, it looks like we have a lot of multiple transactions that contain capital one. And we've got some in and some out, or they're all in. So these are going to be money in transactions from Capital One. So if we go back to our rules tab, we can set up a rule for Capital One, where in a money in transaction, we're going to be looking for the bank text containing Capital One. And in this case, these, let's say we know behind the scenes that these are really payments. So we're going to do a transfer that's going to be, I guess now I'm forgetting whether we're in a credit card or bank account, but let's say
You
that
could
we're
do
going to be,
all of them, couldn't you?
in terms of all bank accounts?
Yeah.
Right. I just forgot which,
Oh,
in this
okay,
particular
okay,
money in
okay,
scenario.
yeah.
So we'll just say we want it to be a transfer to the Borough Bank of Great Churros. So, and we're going to set this not to automatically add. So we save that. We go back to the banking tab. And now we can see all of these rules are, I don't want to say suggesting because we have another feature about suggestions, but it has already completed or like queued up for us to record a transfer. So the reason that this is important is if you have credit card payments that are not initiated in advance, the default for bank feed can be to figure that it's an expense or it'll put it to uncategorized income. It won't actually know that it's a transfer between accounts. So setting up a transfer rule helps validate that we don't have duplicate payments or expenses that were really really transfers.
Mm-hmm.
So we think about it by default as, or most common, we're using this for expense transactions, but we can also use it for transfers, and we can even use it for deposits. I feel pretty strongly that deposits, to the extent they deal with the main source of income, those should really go through the proper workflow that we discussed a couple of days ago, where we're using an invoice, receive payment, make deposit, or a sales receipt and make deposit. But I suppose there are some scenarios like, rewards or something, credit card rewards, redemption, where you might have a deposit transaction where you're just coding it to some sort of other income account. So now let's go through an example where we've got multiple scenarios that apply, where we wanted to categorize, like the gas station example. I'm trying to think of a good multi-example here.
For what?
We've got a lot of Google. And
What are you
let's
trying
say,
to do? I'm sorry, I missed it.
where we've got multiple conditions that are going to apply to one category and vendor.
There should be in that one, if not in that one, then maybe in carrots and ferrets, there's Amazon, where it's like, if it's Amazon and it's a certain amount.
Oh,
I mean, check the rules. It could be in that.
whoops.
It's okay.
I got trigger happy there. So
Yeah. So these Amazon ones, if you look at the Amazon office supplies and then the Amazon's greater than $50, those have multiple categories or multiple criteria.
Okay.
Not, you go to, yes, that one.
So in this case, we're applying anything where we see Amazon, great, as long as the amount is $50 or more. So we're setting the condition to be the amount is greater than $49.99.
And
Which means,
this is an example, you'd never use this because it's Amazon. I just knew that this is a demo account. And so
right,
this is just to show how the rules work and to show the prioritization.
right.
Yeah.
So in this
No
case,
one,
we're saying
when
if
anybody posting, I don't want anybody
if
posting Amazon like this.
but if there's Amazon more than $50, we want it to go to tools. And then if it's just Amazon, then we want that to post to office supplies. Notice in this case the kind of final frontier around rules is that there is prioritization. So it's going to apply these rules in number order. So it's starting here, and it's going to rule number one says if the bank text contains Amazon, I want it to go to office supplies. The second rule says if this rule is Amazon, well, the third rule here is if it's Amazon greater than $50, I want it to go to tools and machinery. Now, in this case, we've got it applied to specific accounts. But if these rules were applied to all accounts, we would absolutely need to make the Amazon and greater than $50 be the number one rule. And the reason is it's going to look for Amazon and then look for greater than $50. Whereas if this plain Amazon rule were number one, it's going to see Amazon. It's not even going to consider any of the other rules.
And I will just say that's how it used to be, but someone has been in here and messed up my prioritization. I think Woody was in here doing something.
Aha.
I used to have my
Mystery hands in the
priorities
equation.
straight, but someone has messed with my priorities.
So if you have more specific conditions, you want those to be a higher priority in the rule list. And that's that's I think really the most common scenario where a user will create a rule, go back to banking and go, fiddle, or they use a different word. Why didn't that rule apply? And it's probably because the priority is, I don't want to say backwards, but the priority is askew with how they want that to come out. So more specificity has to be primary. So because if it doesn't meet the first condition, which is Amazon greater than $50, so if we've got an Amazon charge for $30, it's going to go through rule one and say, yeah, it does have Amazon, but it's not greater than $50. So I'll go to the next rule. The next rule says, does it have Amazon? And the answer is yes. So it's going to go, okay, great. I want that to go to office supplies.
Yep. I love the prioritization.
Yeah. So that is how you can set up rules, the multiple scenario, as well as the scenario where we've got just very simple one condition. And you can have, multiple vendors applied to one category. So those are really the parameters around rules. Is there anything else that you
No.
feel we didn't show? Okay. Well, great. So then we have time for questions.
Yeah, a lot of time for questions.
That's great. I had some questions, but I think you answered them already. Mary asks, why are credit card payments made in the received category?
So I don't know what that means, but I'm going to say as a best practice for me and the people that work for me, when we make a credit card payment, we use the transfer. So we will go into QuickBooks and we say, I want to transfer from my checking account to the credit card account. And that way, when it hits both of the accounts, there's already a transaction in QuickBooks for it to match on both sides. There is another transaction type that is called pay down credit card. And you may see that in the bank feed. So if you haven't already entered that transfer or that transaction in QuickBooks, you may see it suggest that you want to make that payment. The difference between a transfer and pay down credit card is that if I have multiple cards, I have clients who have multiple Bank of America cards, they have multiple American Express cards, they have a Delta Amex, they have a Blue for Business. And so when I see Amex, it may match or it may post that payment to the credit card to the wrong account. And a transfer allows me to very easily change the transfer to from like the Blue Business to the Delta Amex. Whereas, I'm sorry, that crashed. My cat just jumped up on a shelf. So, whereas the pay down credit card, I'm not able to make that, I change that because it's assigning a vendor and then it's posting to that account. I would have to delete the pay down credit card expense and then re-enter it. So I think a best practice is always either to use the transfer or use the pay down credit card first when the payments are made on the credit card website versus entering those payments through the bank feeds.
And then the other thing that occurred to me about that question is I think in bank feed, we see two columns of like withdrawal and deposit or something like that. And in the credit card scenario, it's really charges and returns. And then the payments also show up in that
Received column because the credit card
received
is
thing.
receiving, and that's why it's, and I now that you say that, Bryce, I understand the question. It's in the received column, the payments, because the credit card is receiving some sort of money in, like Bryce just said, it's either receiving a payment or a refund from a vendor.
Okay, she said thanks. So,
Okay, good. Yay.
Yeah,
Mary, I'm hoping that answers your question. Sounds like it does.
it's kind of semantics. It really might say increases and decreases, and then it
Yeah.
would apply to all accounts.
It really does. It just confused me. I didn't realize you were tracking the payments in there of the credit card itself in and out.
Okay.
Just
Yeah. Unfortunately,
where it was coming from.
QuickBooks does not ask Stacy and I for how the term should be used.
I mean, they do. That's what we just spent 2 days at Intuit telling them what
Well,
we
yeah.
wanted. But it doesn't necessarily, just because we want it, doesn't mean the collective, the hive mind that uses QBO is going to agree with us. And that's where
true.
Intuit devs are going to side with. So we can hold our breath and tell them, you know, we want something all day long, but it doesn't necessarily work out in our favor.
If anyone has any questions, please feel free to unmute and ask your question. That would be great. So the last question that I had, which you answered, was the order, the hierarchy of the if-then statements. Because I was looking at the parking example that you had, because it looked like parking, pay parking,
Mobile, yeah.
park mobile, and then pay something else. And that looked like it could be such a general category.
Yes, it is.
It's if, then.
No, for that, it's if it meets any of these. So with the parking, with hotels, with gas stations, you're telling QuickBooks if the bank detail has any of these, any one of these, then post it here. If we were to say all, then it would never work because it would be looking for Chevron, Amoco, Arco, Valara, whatever. But we're saying look at if it contains any of these words in the bank detail, then please do this, not all of them.
Okay. I thought I had it. Thought I had it.
Yes.
And-
So the
and-
any or all is a really important
Yeah.
condition of the condition, parameter around the condition.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks, Kenny Rogers.
Is that really a Kenny Rogers song?
It is when he
Condition
was.
It was first, first somebody.
Yeah, I thought it was much.
It was early.
Yeah.
It's his band. It's not Kenny Rogers.
Oh, okay.
It's
Yeah.
not
It's
first edition, first somebody. I
yeah.
can't remember. Yeah. But
It's
just dropped in to see what condition my condition was in.
That's it. That's the line.
And it is the first edition. So
It is?
So-
Okay.
yeah,
Cool.
exactly.
So we got bank rules and some music history covered today.
We're
What?
good. We're
Yeah.
good. It's been a good day. Okay.
Yeah.
We thank you both for bringing this to us. I had no idea that was available, which would have helped me so much whenever I was trying to have my bank feed into another program, and it all came over in the general ledger, and I just freaked out and undid that whole bank feed. So.
That's
Uh,
okay.
Well, it ended up working. It was a lot of extra work for me, but that's okay. That was okay. Uh, I just want to remind everyone that we do send out surveys so that we can get information on how we're doing as far as our webinar series, and if there's anything else like on the QuickBooks side you'd like to see. So please go ahead and complete those surveys, and we'll take a look and see if maybe there's not some more magic we can get from QuickBooks. Just want to mention we do have some upcoming webinars on the 22nd because we're taking spring break off. We're going to have Rebecca Schultz talking about cryptocurrency, a hot topic nowadays. And then Ashley Cook is going to help us build a high quality email list in 3 parts. Then a couple of days later, we've got Stacy and Bryce coming back for budgets in QuickBooks, which I think is going to be a really interesting topic. And then email list part 2, and then QuickBooks and apps. I'm intrigued. If you would like to register for any of those webinars, just use that QR code in the upper right-hand corner and you can register for those webinars, or you can go to our website, sbdc.nctc.edu. You can register for the webinars there as well, but you can also get contact information. You can schedule an appointment with an advisor, or you can check out some of the resources we already have available for small business owners. And as I mentioned earlier, we are grant funded, and I would like to thank a few of our benefactors, the Small Business Administration, the state of Texas, North Texas SBDC Regional Office in Dallas, and our host college, North Central Texas College. I want to thank you all for joining us today. Be sure and check us out on our YouTube channel for all of our previous webinars. And we're going to go ahead and end today's webinar. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.